Chapter 11, Prelude. After the Federation forces took over Granada and renamed it FS for First Step, they were careful to deploy only enough forces to secure it as a beachhead. The former Zeon base was located at the southernmost tip of the Soviet mountain range on the far side of the moon and was thus directly exposed to Zeon's Abaoku space fortress. The Federation continued to keep its main forces on the other side of the moon, the side facing Earth, at a base codenamed LH for Look Home. The Trichogen, a Salamis-class cruiser, slowly descended to the number 6 deck on LH. It was a standard Earth Federation warship, and its basic shape conformed to that of the floating vessels that had once plied Earth's seas, but because it was designed for a weightless environment, it had subbridges protruding from both the port and starboard sides that could also be used as decks. Only for docking and coming alongside space piers did warships need a true bottom. Ensign Amuro Ray stood and watched from the bridge. After leaving Balda Bay on a civilian transport flying the Earth Federation flag, the Trichogen had come alongside specifically to take him on board, and for the duration of the flight he had been assigned a private room with a chief petty officer 10 years his senior to care for him. It was VIP treatment normally only extended to senior officers, and it should have made him feel at home, but it didn't. Like many combat-seasoned lower-ranking officers, Amuro had a rebellious streak that manifested itself in a regular hierarchy. He quickly became suspicious of his assigned aide, who followed him around like a shadow, and liked to proclaim, "I'm under strict orders to take good care of you, sir." The man's expression said the opposite, that if Amuro so much as tried to leave his prison he would knock his teeth in. Amuro knew that Lieutenant List Hayashida, in accordance with his duty, had probably reported his meeting with Cusco Al in front of the Flanagan Agency. Given the fact that they had separated so soon after meeting, he also knew hardly anyone would believe he had only been trying to date her. No matter what he said, it would look like a furtive meeting of two people trying to exchange information. He could never explain it, but at the same time he hoped it would be overlooked. He had been picked up by the Trichogen and was now docking at LH because he had General Revel's special protection. The Federation military, he suspected, had far more pressing matters at hand than his encounter with Cusco Al. On the bridge, at least, the officers and crew treated him normally, but he nonetheless got the feeling that everyone from the ship's captain on down was keeping him at a distance. Perhaps they did not suspect him. Perhaps, since he would be with them only for the duration of the voyage and was unlikely to be assigned permanently to their ship, they had merely decided not to waste their energy in befriending him. The Trichogen bridge communicated with the LH control tower one last time on docking procedure, and then a giant hatch opened over a huge shaft leading from the fortress's ground level to the underground decks of its port. The shaft extended over a kilometer deep into the moon's surface and held up to 8 Salamis-type ships. Descending all the way required passing through 3 different hatches. As a frontline base, the area was poorly maintained and often had unsecured materials that easily floated free. As some scrap metal bounced off the bridge, someone yelled, "What's the matter with this place? Don't they have any gravity on the moon?" If Cusco Al were really a new type, it occurred to Amuro he probably would never see her again. If they were both sent into combat, the odds that they would meet in the vast universe in which the war was being played out were surely less than 1 in a million. Why, he wondered, had he not spent more time talking with her the night before? Why had he suddenly become so angry? "I just hope I don't run into her the way I ran into Lala's son," he thought, regretting his impetuousness all the more. Just when he was deciding it was all Cusco's fault, his eyes widened. The LH docking pier below seemed to rise up to meet them, and the Trichogen quickly decelerated to reach its assigned mooring spot. There were people in civilian clothes on the pier rushing about in preparation for the landing, and several military heli-cars were zipping in and among them. Amuro instantly forgot about Cusco Al. "Hey, look!" he excitedly exclaimed to anyone in earshot. "I'll be damned! My crewmates are there. There's Bright, my old skipper who's always flying off the handle, and Mirai, the ensign with the maternal instinct, and Kai Scheiden. And look there, that's Hayato. They've all come to greet me. Hey, and there's Chief Petty Officer Mark, and Oscar, And that big heavy-set man, that Slegger Rowe, the gunnery officer, and Ensign Ram Dawai, the engineer, with the big laugh. And wait a minute, that pretty blonde, that's Petty Officer Selah Mas. 2 weeks had elapsed since the destruction of Texas, during which time he had assumed most of his friends had been killed. Now, seeing so many of them alive, he felt that an enormous burden had been lifted from his spirit. So many had survived. But one memory suddenly moved into his mind like a dark cloud on a sunny day. Ryu. Ryu wasn't there. Ryu, who had begun pilot training at the same time he had, but had been destroyed in a mobile suit battle. If only Ryu were still alive. When the Trichigen finally docked, the captain turned to Amuro and said, "Congratulations on a job well done, Ensign. We look forward to hearing about your further success in the new 127th Autonomous Squadron." "The TH?" Amuro queried. The skipper grinned and said, "Well, it's just a rumor, but we hear it's an elite combat unit handpicked from the Federation forces. If General Revel thought enough of you to have us give you VIP treatment, I'm sure you're among the pilots selected. I'm confident you'll perform superbly, Ensign." "Thanks, sir," he answered, resisting the impulse to tell him that he also knew the negative implications of any such assignment. He shook the man's hand, feeling terribly adult about the whole matter, and said, "Here's wishing the Trichigen good hunting, sir." As soon as he disembarked onto the pier, Amuro heard a familiar voice cry out, "Way to go, Amuro, our star pilot. We knew you'd make it. Now tell us you're surprised to see us alive." It was his old comrade, Kai Scheiden. Amuro laughed. "Surprised? Hey, I'm amazed, especially to see you," he said. The crowd on the pier burst into laughter at the good-natured exchange, and he felt himself drawn into the mood of the moment. The informality of it all was perfect, and nothing could have pleased him more. He was reunited with his friends, with his old crewmates, and was filled with a profound sense of relief. It was almost like being reunited with a family. "Good job, Ensign," said Bright, his skipper. "A lot of cheers went up around here when we got word you'd made it to Side 6 alive. We've been waiting for you a long time." Amuro looked around at everyone again and again, still not completely believing his eyes. And then he caught sight of the familiar blonde young woman standing behind Petty Officer First Class Howd. He smiled briefly, and she smiled back. Her mouth seemed to form the words, "Welcome home, Amuro," but she was drowned out by the rest of the crowd. "General Revel's waiting to see you," Bright announced, letting Amuro know he was not supposed to dawdle too long. There would be time to socialize later. Mirai began hustling everyone toward 4 LA cars standing by. He noticed a new, confident air about her, and wondered if it could be simply a result of surviving the ordeal on Texas. Selah jumped in Kai's LA car behind Hayato. Ramdawai, sitting next to Mirai in back of Bright's LA car, yelled out for Amuro to join them, and he eagerly jumped in the front. It was hard to contain his enthusiasm. "Yahoo! Step on it," he yelled gleefully. First Kai and then Bright accelerated forward, and the others followed. The engines of the huge moored Trichigen shut down. When the boisterous former crew of the Pegasus left the giant domed underground port, the entire area was finally enveloped in silence. Along the way, Amuro's crewmates began to fill him in on what had transpired in his absence. "I'm sure you know," Bright said, "that the 13th Autonomous was completely successful in its feint maneuver. Despite losing our ship, we managed to lure several of Cassilia's ships out into the open, and that helped the main force achieve a total victory in the Star One campaign. That goes without saying, of course. We wouldn't be here on this moon base if we hadn't won. All in all, things don't seem to be going well for the Xeon side. Think they're having some sort of internal power struggle, sir?" "You could say that. Relations between the Zabi family members seem a little strained, to say the least." "Really?" "It's just a rumor, Amuro," Mirai added from behind him. "But people say there's a power struggle going on between Jiren, Caecilia, and Dozel, the 3 surviving Zabi siblings. By the way, Mirai." Amuro suddenly turned and asked her teasingly, "Did you gain some W8? Meh." She gasped and covered her cheeks with her hands. Her small round eyes practically popped out of her head. Well, I guess I have put on a kilogram or two in the last 10 days. I'll bet the military hasn't been giving you guys enough to do, that's what," Amuro said with a grin. "The Force is famous for poor communication horizontally in the ranks, right? They've probably forgotten all about you folks. Sorry to disappoint you, Amuro, but things have been so busy here on LH recently, you'd probably wish you were off fighting instead. And that, kiddo," Bright injected with a mischievous grin, "is why everyone really wanted to come see you. They figured they could get out of a day's work." Amuro was puzzled. Bright seemed to have matured by at least 10 years. Was his extra confidence also simply that of a survivor? "To tell you the truth," he said, "you all seem different to me somehow." Different? Different. Maybe this is a weird thing to say, but everyone seems to be getting along so well now, almost like a family. I never sensed that before. Even Sayla, the one everyone used to tease and call the bungler, seems to be doing great. "Maybe you're right," Mirai said. "Maybe it has something to do with having survived Texas. As for Sayla, some of us did used to feel she was different and didn't really fit in. But it turns out she's the one who helped us all escape Texas. She's the one who showed us the way out of the colony before it exploded. It was like there was a mysterious voice leading her that none of the rest of us could hear." Bright interjected, "You mean she might be sort of a new type, right? Well, maybe not as much as Amuro. Say, not to change the subject, but look at Kai and Hayato in the other LA car, both vying for her attention." "I'd say that's proof that she's finally been accepted," said Rum Dowai, seated next to Mirai. As they entered operations, Amuro turned to Bright and asked, "Did I hear right, Skipper? Did she say Pegasus?" "She did, but it's really the Pegasus II. It turns out the Federation fleet had a second White Base-class warship, and we've all been reassigned to it. We're apparently going to form the core of the 127th Squadron." Amuro fell silent for a second, realizing he was the only who had absolutely no idea what was going on. Then he asked, "We're shipping out again soon?" "We sure are," Bright replied. "Time's apparently running out. The word is that Zeon's cooking up something a lot bigger than a little skirmish on the other side of the moon." Inside operations, General Revel took a puff on his cigar and let his eyes follow the trail of smoke. "I'm speaking to you, Ensign Amuro Ray, on the assumption that you may be a rare find, a true new type, and I expect you to hold what I say in the strictest confidence." "Yes, sir." "Zeon forces have been lying low the last 2 weeks, but there's a reason, and it's not simply because they lost Granada. They're apparently developing a new secret weapon, one with awesome destructive power, and they're stalling for time." Bright blurted out, "You mean they're going to put a new type unit into action, sir?" When Revel ignored him, he stepped backward and looked down at the floor sheepishly. "No, I'm talking about a weapon capable of directly hitting the moon from Zeon territory." "A direct strike?" Amuro felt a chill run down his spine. That would be no mean feat. He had never heard of a beam weapon capable of inflicting direct damage from tens of thousands of kilometers away. In theory, a long-range missile might work, but even if it emitted Minovsky particles to confuse local defense radar systems, it would never be able to break through a defense perimeter of contact space mines. It was precisely because of those limitations that current military strategy still dictated the use of battleships for such attacks. Revel laughed at the sound of Amuro's shocked voice. "I'm exaggerating, Ensign. I'm exaggerating." He stared at Bright, as if to scold the overly young lieutenant for his earlier remark, and then continued, "But not totally. Ever since the end of the 20th century, people have talked of a weapon that could instantly annihilate an entire fleet, talked of using an entire space colony to create a colossal laser cannon. It's exactly the sort of madness Zeon would seriously consider." "Sir," Amuro said, "are you saying Zeon might use one of its sealed cylinder colonies for that?" "Exactly." Bright interjected again, "But wouldn't they have to build a new colony cylinder specifically for the cannon?" "Not necessarily. Don't forget, Giranzabi's an absolute dictator. All he has to do is evacuate the residents of one of their existing cylinders and then reinforce its structure. It's probably not as difficult an engineering feat as it seems. We have information that they've already begun evacuating one. Revel said it casually, but Amuro knew the scale of the operation would be mind-boggling. Even the most compact colonies were being built to house up to 5 million people. Large ones could hold 10 to 15 million. I find it hard to believe anyone could carry out an operation of that size so fast, sir, he said, staring at the general. Sir, you at its core, that's what the 127th Autonomous Squadron's all about. We want you to be in the vanguard. Me, sir? Thanks, I guess. I've made arrangements for your promotion, Ensign, but our staff seems a little bogged down with paperwork these days, so it might take a while for it to formally come through. Revel then picked up a letter of commission from his desk and handed it to Muro, who stood up to receive it. Amuro started to read from the paper. You are herein reassigned to the 127th Autonomous Squadron, when he was interrupted. That's correct, Revel said. The performance of the Pegasus and its crew under the command of Brightnow here has convinced me we should take a chance on all of you being potential new types. There's no sense waiting for the desk jockeys at headquarters in Jaburo to understand something like this. They've been working in their underground complex on Earth so long they'd never believe that merely living in the vastness of space could alter human consciousness the way the new type theory postulates. The general ground out his cigar in an ashtray and stood up. It's good to see you again, Ensign. I know you won't disappoint me. Thank you, sir. I'll do my best. He shook the general's hand and, despite the powerful grip, could tell the man was tired. It was no wonder. The general put his career on the line and fought tooth and nail with general staff to get us assigned to the Pegasus II, Bright said as they left the office. It seems like the Jaburo desk jockeys are an even bigger problem than Zeon. Amuro pondered the meaning of Bright's words. In the distance, Commander Char Aznable could see a Bawaku, the odd umbrella-like shape of the floating fortress, backlit by the rays of the sun. But he was more interested in what was going on inside the cockpit of his new model mobile suit. The accelerator pedal beneath his right foot was divided into 3 main stages, each of which could be precisely modulated. He floored it and noted that the entire mobile suit cockpit, including his seat and the control panel, acted as a 360-degree shock absorber, canceling out much of the G-force that would normally have borne down on him. He was delighted. The new model, a Rickdom, would perform even better than his old Zaku. It was larger in girth, and its armor was twice as strong, but it could turn on a dime. Moreover, the handheld beam bazooka was directly linked to a highly efficient accelerator built into the arm, giving the mobile suit the firepower of the main cannon on a Memusai-class cruiser. With this thing, he exulted, I finally might be able to bag that White Federation suit. Then a voice came over his receiver, so garbled by Minovsky interference that it was nearly unintelligible. Here comes the target, Commander. He barked verification into his mic, and his message was transmitted to the Abawaku operators by both radio and laser transmission. Several seconds later, when he was able to identify the target visually, he lined up the mono-eye sight of his mobile suit with the bead on the beam bazooka barrel in its right hand. Then he pulled the trigger on the control stick, sending a laser-simulated beam streaking toward the target, and awaited a signal telling him if he had hit home. He had complete faith in his aim, and used the intervening seconds to check the 5 Rickdom suits deployed on either side of him. They had not even sighted the target yet. How many times had they performed the same maneuver? He was beginning to lose faith in his men. In the last 3 or 4 moves executed, they'd always been too slow. None were new recruits. All were veterans, survivors from the beginning of the war, and all were skilled marksmen. 4 had even bagged the ultimate prize, Federation battleships. Perhaps, he thought, the difference between himself and them was that he had more new-type potential. The futility of forming an effective, coordinated combat team with them grated on his nerves. Another target appeared to streak out of the fiery sun, attacking the Rickdom formation in a zigzag maneuver, and Char pulled back to see how the others performed. He had to laugh at himself a little for even believing the notion that humans could improve dramatically overnight or suddenly become new types. Perhaps, he thought with a tinge of bitterness, there had been only one real new type, Lala Sun. Then the garbled voice of the operator Onabawa-ku said, "An Elmeth will be part of today's mock combat." "I thought that wasn't in the schedule today," Shar griped. "Her Excellency Caecilia specifically asked to see your team's performance against it, sir." "Very well," he replied, "but it means we have to stay out here and practice for another 5 minutes." Before he could finish the sentence, he saw the flare of the Elmeth streak through the blackness. "I wonder if the thing is piloted by a human," he thought. If so, no one had informed him. "Formation G," he yelled out to his men, initiating a defense tactic that had been devised to take on the White Federation mobile suit, the Gundam, on the assumption that its pilot was a new type. It involved deploying the 6 Rick Doms in an enveloping circle over an area of 500 kilometers in diameter. It was impossible to get a good look at the Elmeth itself at that distance, but the computers in their suits would put them on a course estimated to bring them into contact, and the rest would be automatic. They would gradually close the noose around the enemy machine and try to sight it as soon as possible visually. That was the theory, at least. 10 seconds later, the Elmeth had slipped through their net and was closing in on one of the Rick Doms, attacking it without the aid of its remote-controlled auxiliary bit units, instead using its twin particle cannon with devastating effect. When the 4th Rick Dom in the formation had been destroyed, Shar knew what was happening. "The Elmeth's not on remote. The pilot's real," he yelled. In the same instant, he spotted the machine streaking above his own line of fire. He slammed his mobile suit into an evasive maneuver and reflexively pulled the trigger on his beam bazooka. The shot was wasted. Then came another attack. He aimed and thought he had the Elmeth in his sights, but it outmaneuvered him and dropped below his field of vision. Shar yelled. He heard the simulated sound of something slamming into his Rick Dom and his fuselage creaking. Could he have been hit in the split second when his mind was diverted? The readout below his main monitor indicated that the left leg of his mobile suit had been shot off. He put his machine into a retreat. As he watched, in the next few seconds the Elmeth polished off the remaining 2 Rick Doms. The Elmeth's smooth skin swept upward at the rear, giving it the rather charming silhouette of a tri-cornered hat from the front, but its performance was far from charming. The Elmeth was deadlier than a humanoid-style mobile suit, and not because of its shape, which had little advantage over that of old-style space fighters, but because of its new type pilot. "I bet they've found another woman to pilot the damn thing," Char fumed. He sensed a unique presence emanating from the machine, something female yet unlike that of Lala Sun. Whatever it was, it possessed a defiant, abrasive quality. Could it be Cusco Al, the junior-grade lieutenant candidate whom Garcia Dowell had mentioned? He feared a repeat of what had happened with Lala. He did not want to see another woman piloting the Elmeth. The Elmeth floated right in front of his Rick Dom and then suddenly changed course. And sure enough, he caught a glimpse of a woman in a normal suit seated in an illuminated cockpit. He couldn't recognize her, but he knew the unusually large helmet of her normal suit. He barked out the order to reform, and the other Rick Doms fell into their conventional flight formation around him. He could see the rear of the Elmeth right in front of him. "Laugh at us if you want," he thought, as he put his mobile suit into second-level combat speed and soared past the Elmeth, his 5 comrades trying hard to keep up. For a second he imagined he heard the Elmeth pilot giggle, but in an instant a trail of light streaked across his main monitor and disappeared into a corner of a Bawaku. It was the Elmeth. "Damn woman," he muttered, and then he heard, or thought he heard, a reply. "I'm not a damn woman. I have a name, Cusco Al greater than." There was nothing audible. There were no words. A thought had simply slipped into mind Char's. It's true we're putting a prototype into action, but we're not compromising on performance. We're talking about something fundamentally different from the new GM suits. Understand? In the mobile suit development hangar on the Federation's LH Moon base, Amuro listened to Professor Moss Khan lecture and realized that the man's authoritative, masculine demeanor was belied by a feminine tendency to overexcitability. Mosk was one of the most talented mobile suit engineers in the Federation, so Amuro tried to interpret his behavior in the best possible light and write off his outbursts as the product of an overly intellectual orientation to life. "But Professor," he asked, "if you use a prototype mobile suit design, I don't see how you'll be able to exploit the strengths of the magnetic coating." You're trained not to think but just to sit in your cockpit and attack the enemy, so I guess it's beyond your comprehension. But the magnetic coating practically eliminates all the mechanical friction normally occurring in the mobile suit powertrain. You mean it functions sort of like oil? Oil? Did you say oil, lad? Amuro realized he had used the wrong word. Oil was an archaic term, and it appeared to have raised Mosk's hackles. "Well," he said, "I'm trying to understand, sir. I know that this prototype Gundam is the third model produced, and that it was put through a pretty strenuous test period. But as the person who has to pilot the machine, I'd just like to make sure every potential problem is eliminated in advance." "Well, that's clearly impossible. We've painted every single point of physical contact in the powertrain with magnetic coating. The positive and negative fields of the coating repel each other, thereby completely eliminating any mechanical friction. That's the theory. Understand? This is supposed to eliminate mechanical interference no matter what amount of force is applied." There was something Amuro wanted to say, but he held his tongue. He knew that eliminating mechanical friction would also eliminate the natural braking effect it could provide. And although the new mobile suit body should be able to withstand almost any degree of stress, even if an engine ran into the red zone, he knew it still wouldn't have the speed or agility of movement he really wanted. "Oh, you're a clever lad. Keep me informed of the test results. And when you write out your reports, don't forget I'll be reading them too." "Yes, sir." It was awfully difficult, Amuro realized, to judge people by first impressions. Those who seemed pleasant at first usually were good people. Professor Mosk had not been particularly pleasant, but the instant Amuro had changed his attitude to one of deference, he had become so friendly that it was uncanny. Perhaps, Amuro thought, it was a characteristic of technologists in his field. While still pondering the professor's personality, Amuro kicked off the hangar deck and sailed through the low-gravity air to the new Gundam's cockpit hatch. He was relieved that the suit's basic humanoid design had not been tampered with, and that, unlike the GM models, it still had two eyes. If the machine was functionally going to reflect the pilot's will, his will, he wanted it to have some sort of expression. It need not be able to frown or raise its eyebrows like the crude, pneumatic-powered Marilyn Monroe humanoid robots popular in shows in the last century. The two eyes were enough to create the emotive quality he wanted. As always, the Gundam cockpit was encased in cold, steel-like material that felt like coffin walls. He shut the front hatch, whereupon the sound of the idling motor faded, leaving him enveloped in the zen-like nothingness of total darkness. The instrument panel was inactive. Something about the air in the cockpit reminded him that maintenance people had been working on it a few minutes earlier, but it was freshly vacuumed and spotless. The pilot seat was as hard and uncomfortable as ever, but that was to be expected. Everything was more or less as he was accustomed to. The main control levers were on either side of him, and the foot pedals were in their appropriate locations. Even in pitch darkness, he knew exactly where the 28 switches of the control panel were. It was a relief. Switches, levers, pedals. All he had to do was stretch out his arms and legs, and everything was where it was supposed to be. This should do fine, he thought, for the time being at least. He wasn't really sure where the thought "the time being" had come from or what he had really meant. Peering around him, he knew it was not true, as some people said, that total darkness was frightening. He let his pupils dilate, and still couldn't see a thing. In fact, he could hardly tell if his eyes were really open. He looked straight ahead and let himself relax. He listened to and counted his breaths. He became more aware of being alive and felt incredibly peaceful. Then he heard, or sensed, a pinging noise. It was faint, but it was soon accompanied by what felt like a tiny thread of light streaming out from the center of his brain into the darkness before him. Through the hatch of the Gundam cockpit, through the surface of the moon above him, and into the vastness of the surrounding space. The light was sharply defined but had a warm, reassuring glow to it. "Lala?" Amuro shifted in his seat. He wanted to see where the light was headed, but it was already gone. It had not been a hallucination. He knew it had continued on into the black space before him, but he felt confused. Lala's son, he thought again, and an indescribable aching sensation welled in his body, irritating and destroying his earlier tranquility. A chill slowly crawled up his spine and spread out through his flesh until the ends of his limbs quivered. Lala's son. Is it Lala's son? Something in his mind nearly screamed the thought. He felt even more annoyed. What are you trying to tell me, Lala, or whoever you are? What is it? He knew he had to do something. He put his hand on one of the Gundam's control levers and squeezed it. Then he turned the key in the ignition and through the floor of the cockpit felt the engine groan before fully igniting. When the instrument panel sprang to life, its lights nearly blinded him with their sudden brightness and instantly banished the entire black universe before him. They had 2 stages of intensity, and when they reached the second, he knew the main engine had fired. With a vroom, the Gundam revealed its inner power. Then he knew part of the source of his frustration. The machine enveloping him was a weapon. Are new types, he wondered, merely an extension of a weapon? Just another tool of destruction? Is that what Lala's son was? Is that what the Red Comet is? Is that all I am? He was flesh and blood, not a machine. He wanted desperately to refute such a repulsive idea and assert a higher purpose in life for himself, but a swirling undercurrent of self-doubt undermined his ability to do so. New types are humans. He pushed the right-hand control lever forward, and the Gundam's right arm rose with a burst of energy, far faster than the old model, and with enough force to make the entire mobile suit fuselage recoil. But with that movement, Amuro's own reflexes also came alive, and his limbs began moving the other controls in the small cockpit, working rapidly to keep the Gundam properly balanced. A team of mecha men, who had just finished a job in another corner of the hangar, turned and stared at the Gundam. It was standing with its back still attached to a maintenance fixture, but its limbs began slicing through the air. One man yelled to his comrades, "Hey, get a load of that, will ya? That shows what magnetic coating can do." The new Gundam was infinitely more maneuverable than either the original model or the mass-produced GM suits currently in use, and its next maneuver was truly astonishing. Its left arm slowly rose in the air, paused for a few seconds, and then slammed downward, but the body of the machine scarcely twitched despite having moved off the supporting fixture. By slightly shifting the suit's hips, Amuro had canceled the weight of the mass in its arm perfectly. To the cheers of the mecha men, he then began moving the Gundam with such speed and grace that it looked more like a human boxer than an inorganic machine. In theory, it should not even have been possible. An order then issued from the control room. Number 6 hatches will open shortly. All personnel in hangar area must move to the airlock. The mecha men in the maintenance area ran for cover to the airlock room and clustered around its 1-meter square blast-proof window, transfixed. The new Gundam began striding forth. After passing through the double-layered hangar hatches, Amuro entered the vacuum area of the moon base. On the Gundam's surrounding displays, he saw a sliver of Earth shining in the distance, surrounded by stars blazing in the heavens. He announced into his mic, "Ensign Amuro Ray in G3 ready for launch, now commencing practice flight." The base flight control officer replied, stating what they both already knew. "Take it away, Ensign. Remember, you're out there to get used to the suit's flight characteristics." Amuro double-checked his radar and laser sensors. Neither would be much good with the high Minovsky concentration in the area, but the lasers could at least act as a friend or foe ID signal, and there was something reassuring about having radar even if it didn't work. He looked up at the heavens through his main display, double-checking the area in space from which his computer was registering information. Somewhere out there, he knew a space beacon would delineate the practice area for him. "Blast off." He said it half to himself, half as a formality to inform the flight officer. He fired the main rockets in the Gundam's backpack, and to his astonishment, the suit soared nearly 10,000 meters in seconds. The new model was far faster than he had expected. The laser accelerator in its nuclear fusion engine had been improved, theoretically yielding only 20 to 30% more power. But when combined with the new magnetic coating on the powertrain, The resulting synergy seemed to create a nearly 200% increase in both power and speed. Yet he was still bothered by one thought: if only the armor had been reinforced too. There was something disturbing about improving the machine's performance without improving his own personal protection. He understood the logic behind the changes made, but he was the pilot, and the one whose life was on the line. Perhaps he was asking too much, but he was human. Perhaps, he imagined, it was even something Lala had tried to warn him about earlier. He was sure of one thing: the issue of new types and their future transcended his personal safety. He knew the leap in consciousness, the sense of prescience he had experienced with Lala's son, was not limited to them alone. Their special communion had heightened their five senses and expanded the fundamental communication of which all humans were capable. And in the end, it had generated a mysterious, compound universal wisdom. It was an experience, he was convinced, that led beyond personal oblivion. But if Amuro was a potential new type, he was also an ensign in the Federation forces, a military pilot. And military pilots were not supposed to ponder the future of mankind. They were supposed to kill and survive to kill again. To stay alive and develop as a true new type, he would first have to conquer the vast obstacle unfolding before him, the battlefield of outer space. It seemed like a cruel fate, but whether military pilot or new type, his fundamental emotional makeup was the same, and he knew that he would just have to wait and see what happened. The new Gundam mobile suit was painted a deep gray, and therefore was harder to detect visually in space, and it had been designed to be even more invisible to radar. To make certain accidents did not happen during training flights, it had running lights for identification on its shoulders and toes. To Amuro's left and right, the lights streaked through the space among the stars. On the bridge of the Pegasus to 2nd, Chief Petty Officer Mark Cran suddenly sighted a unique laser oscillation on the computer-generated model displayed on the ceiling and called out, "It's the new Gundam!" The computer system was even less reliable than radar, but it was at least capable of detecting and encoding laser signals. 3 degrees to port, elevation 36 degrees, distance 180 kilometers. Barked Petty Officer Oscar Dublin, perched opposite Mark on the bridge's boom crane. Bright scrambled down from the captain's seat at the base of the crane arm, ordering, "Sayla, open a radio link. The Gundam's coming in for a test landing on Deck 1. "Gundam, G3, Sayla announced, her eyes intent on the communications panel in front of her. "This is Pegasus II. Can you read us?" "Over." She sounded so professional, it was hard to believe that she had once been a fresh recruit, derisively referred to as the bungler. Amuro's voice burbled up through the static. "This is G3, I read you. My instruments confirm the Pegasus Seku. In a heavy concentration of Minovsky particles, it took a highly trained communications operator to understand what he was saying." "Pegasus to Gundam," Sayla replied. "We have opened the hatch on Deck 1 for you. You are cleared for landing." "Understood. Landing at 3rd combat speed. Incoming." Bright turned to Mirai, standing with her hands on the helm. She switched it to automatic and ran to the bridge window to see the Gundam. "He came into view awfully fast, didn't he?" she said. "That's Amuro for you," Bright replied. "I'll say. The ace of the TH Pegasus II, the second white base-class Cosmo cruiser in the Federation arsenal, was designed as an assault landing ship, but it actually resembled a giant winged horse. In the vacuum of space, the wings performed no aerodynamic function, but acted as heat dissipation panels and held the ship's solar energy cells in many of its vernier jets. They were so huge that on Earth they would have made the ship appear capable of leaping through the stratosphere. The main bridge of the craft, protruding forward near the prow, looked like the head of a horse, hence the name of the first ship of this class, Pegasus. The second ship had been christened with the same name, because the original crew had been transferred to it, and because General Revel believed in luck. As the officers on the bridge marveled, the Gundam approached the Pegasus II and logged the correct coordinates for landing on Deck 1 in the ship's right front leg. The upper and lower hatch doors of Deck 1 opened, exposing the landing floor and its approach lights. The Gundam moved straight toward them. a line of horizontal green lights on either side of the deck, blinking in confirmation of its course. Simultaneously, indicators showing horizontal status, attitude, and speed relative to the ship blinked in sync on Amuro's. Console laser sensors were accurate at distances under 2,000 meters, even with a heavy Minovsky concentration. The hatch quickly looming into view was huge, but the landing site still wasn't an easy target. The Gundam sailed toward the center of it, streaking by painted white guidelines. Then, with a whoosh, retro rockets fired, its knees bent to absorb the shock, and both legs hit the ground simultaneously. Amuro had made a perfect single-point landing. "Congratulations, Ensign Amuro." Kai Scheiden's voice echoed from the upper left 3-inch monitor in Amuro's cockpit. It looked beautiful. Amuro grinned bashfully at the image on the screen. While releasing his seatbelt, he replied, "I used to be able to fly by the seat of my pants, but I think I forgot how. I broke out in a cold sweat a couple of times back there." On the next monitor over, the face of the flight deck supervisor appeared, yelling, "G3, stand by for 30 seconds. Do not open your cockpit hatch until air intake is completed on Deck 1. It belonged to a young recruit Amuro had never seen before, who immediately introduced himself. "Petty Officer First Class Callahan Slacer. At your service, sir." He seemed so zealous, Amuro wondered if he would be able to stay calm in times of crisis. "Glad to be working with you, Callahan." 20 seconds have already elapsed. 20 seconds. "Yes, sir. Go ahead and open the hatch, sir." Amuro pulled a lever and opened the cockpit hatch. It shared space with his main display, which meant that to exit, he had to use a footrest built into the far right side of the console panel and then ease his torso out. A ramp from the right wall of the flight deck extended out to his cockpit. Well, how was it? It was Lieutenant Seki, the ship's engineer, whom Amuro had known ever since his days on Lunat II. "No problem, sir. The magnetic coating seems to work perfectly. Well, I'll still give it a once-over to check for anything unusual. You know how it is. I've got to compensate for those scientists and the top brass. They always tend to rush these things." "You think there might be a problem with the coating, sir?" "Ha ha." Amuro laughed despite himself. There was more than a little irony in Seki's words. After all, the Pegasus II and its entire crew were part of a grand experiment. They were all, in a sense, test pilots. Then he heard a "yo" and saw a smiling face in a lemon-yellow pilot's suit. It was Kai Scheiden. "Say, Kai," he asked, pointing at a new red mobile suit to the rear of Deck 1. "Is that gun cannon over there the one you're piloting?" Gun cannons like the Gundam were of humanoid design and had 2 arms capable of holding a beam rifle, but they were not as well suited for close-quarter combat as the Gundam or the GM models were. Instead, they had 2 28-centimeter cannons built into their shoulders and were used primarily for long-range support. "Yeah," Kai answered without enthusiasm. "That's the C-108. It'll do the job, maybe." Kai didn't have the type of positive personality Amuro normally admired, but the two of them had begun their pilot training together, had survived combat together, and now were linked by a bond different from friendship, but just as real. "Everyone's waiting, partner," Kai said. Since being reunited with his comrades on the LH docking pier, Amuro had spent 2 days alone working with Moss Khan, readying the new Gundam. Now he would finally, hopefully, be able to spend a little time relaxing with them on the ship. Just thinking about it made him feel flush with anticipation, but there was still an enormous amount of work to do. The Pegasus II carried 5 mobile suits including the Gundam, and several hours would be required to train the suit pilots to work as a team, in formation. Amuro's first assignment, therefore, was to lead a special training session on the ship's bridge. The moment he stepped into the room, he was warmly welcomed. Lieutenant Bright in the captain's seat saluted and barked, "Congratulations, Ensign." "Well, how was the flight?" Mirai asked. "You looked great out there, Amuro. Well done," Hayato added. Amuro first noticed the new faces among the group, including Ensigns Sarkis McGovern and Kriyamaja, both new mobile suit pilots. but he also saw some old ones. Mark Cran and Oscar Dublin grinned at him from their operator seats on the bridge boom crane, and when Selah Moss turned around and smiled at him, he nearly choked. With her blonde hair and nearly perfect posture, she looked more beautiful than he remembered. Perhaps, he suddenly thought, she really was the woman of his dreams. He felt a little confused. Before taking off in the new Gundam from the LH moon base while sitting in the pitch blackness of his new cockpit, he had experienced a sort of intuitive communion with the memory of Lala's son. But there had been something missing with Lala, and here it was. For the first time since parting with Kuzcoal, he felt physical desire. "Congratulations, Ensign," Selah said. Her clear voice sounded like music to his ears. "I never realized how much I wanted her." Surprised at himself, Amuro decided to invite her to join him that night.